Here we go again. The headlines are full of doom and gloom about all the signs of an impending housing bubble. The housing market's going to crash any day now. You know how long I've been hearing that? Right around 2 years now, and guess what? Has not crashed yet. So no, I'm not going for it. And yeah, I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record. Wow, that's a really dated reference, isn't it? Well, anyway, I know I'm repeating myself over and over, but some messages do bear repeating. So here goes. We are not, I repeat, not in a housing bubble. At least that's my opinion anyway. Stick around for just a minute and I will explain why not. Hi there, I'm Stephanie Frost, a real estate agent in Ocala, Florida, and this is where I talk about all things real estate in the Ocala and Marion County, Florida area. So why do I keep insisting that we're not in a housing bubble when every other headline you run into seems to be shouting it to the skies? Well, there's a couple reasons, most of which you've heard before, but humor me a little. The last housing bubble was caused largely because of easy money and a whole lot of speculation in the housing market. Loans were easy to get, wildly creative, and pretty much anybody with a pulse could qualify for one, or even two or three. And a whole lot of people took advantage of all that easy money. And who could blame them? Banks were practically throwing money at them. Balloon mortgages, interest-only loans, ninja loans, it was mind-boggling. Back then, I remember showing home after home that had changed hands 2 or even 3 times in as little as 6 months, and going up in price every single time. It was like some people were using the housing market like a giant pyramid scheme. Didn't matter what they paid because they could just sell at a profit next month. Because a whole lot of people weren't buying those homes to live in, they were buying them to resell. And while some people can do that and make a living at it, everybody everywhere can do that and make a living at it all at once. That particular business model is just not sustainable. So the housing market hit a tipping point where supply far outstripped demand, and it fell faster than a giant roller coaster at Disney World. And after the market crashed, I spent a lot of time doing short sales and foreclosures, just like every other agent in town. And the one thing that I will never forget was how many people I ran into that had multiple homes in foreclosure, or had mortgage payments nearly equal to their entire monthly salary. Payments they could never have actually afforded on their best day. It was a really ugly time for a whole lot of people. Things were just bad. But the housing market is a whole lot different now, even with all the crazy stuff that's going on and even with the rising interest rates. For starters, it's a whole lot harder to get a mortgage these days. Believe it or not, you actually have to prove you've got enough income to make those payments. Go figure. And I don't see anybody buying 2 or 3 homes to resell. Heck, it's hard enough in this market to buy 1, let alone 3, so that's really not an issue. And you know what else? If you actually read through all those articles that are screaming about a housing bubble in the headlines, you'll find out that after that attention-grabbing headline, pretty much every single one of them goes on to say that housing prices aren't going to drop like a stone. But instead, the market's going to cool off and house prices will hit a plateau, which is pretty darn different than a housing crash. And furthermore, most of those same articles go on to say that prices will probably keep rising through the summer and probably on into early next year, albeit at a slower rate than they have been, thank goodness. And that's the one place that I do agree with all the doomsayers. The double-digit home price increases that we've been seeing lately are unsustainable. They can't keep going on like that forever. But being unsustainable just means that the current climb in prices won't last. Not that they're going to fall off a cliff. They'll just start going up by leaps and bounds, and then they'll level off at some as yet undetermined price point. And let's face it, there are really only 2 things that drive home sales: supply and demand. When demand is low and supply is high, home prices drop. Stands to reason. But supply is still really low right now, and that's just not likely to change anytime soon. Homeowners should start putting their homes on the market fast enough to keep up with demand. There was a recent survey by Discover Home Loans that found out that right now 79% of all homeowners would rather renovate their home than move. Now you'd think that all these high home prices would encourage people to sell their homes and cash in, but most of those folks would have to buy another home. And then they're going to be the ones paying those high costs, so it's not as inviting a proposition as you might think. And the end result of that reluctance to move is that inventory is staying really low. And not only are sellers still a little slow to put their homes on the market, builders can't build fast enough to take the pressure off either. We are still having tons of supply issues, so builders are having to pace their builds accordingly. Just basic things like windows can take 2 to 3 months to get in after you order them, if you can find a supplier. Same things with appliances, cabinets, you name it. Some builders have had to resort to not offering certain appliances at all in their new homes, just because they can't get them, at least not in bulk or on a reliable basis. I know of at least one major builder locally who's had to change cabinet suppliers at least twice in the last 6 months, just that I know of, because those suppliers weren't able to provide the cabinets on a reliable schedule. And if there's one thing that builders really need to have, it's a reliable build schedule. Now add to that labor shortages and the fact that permitting departments nearly everywhere are overwhelmed and dealing with huge backlogs themselves, and you start to see why we're having such an inventory problem. And that lack of inventory is why I say that we're not heading for a crash right now. Are things going to change? Oh, absolutely. They've got to. Like I said, this current market is not sustainable. Prices just can't keep going up at these rates year over year. So we're definitely going to see price increases slowing down. And some markets are going to slow down faster than others, I'm not going to lie. But that's where the demand part comes into play. Now, I can really only speak to my market here in Florida, but let's face it, Florida is still a very attractive destination for people looking to move. I mean, come on. Most people, given the choice to work from home and live wherever they want to, are going to at least give heavy consideration to states like Florida in general, and a whole lot of them are choosing to move to Ocala in particular. The Pods Moving Company just ranked the Ocala area as the number 5 on their list of top destinations that people are moving to. And according to Move Buddha, Ocala is the number 1 destination for moving in the country. By some estimates, there are about 154 people moving to the Ocala area for every 100 people leaving, which is not really a huge surprise to me. Great weather, lack of state income tax, and relatively affordable home prices compared to a whole lot of other areas, both in the state of Florida and in the country as a whole. Add it all up, and home prices here will probably continue rising at least a little while before they level out. Yeah, inventory is starting to creep up a little bit, but just by a little bit. Those days of throwing a home on the market and getting 20 offers the first day are probably behind us, but we are still seeing tons of homes getting multiple offers, and homes are still going under contract in record time. So if you've been planning on waiting out the market and buying when prices tank, and be honest, because you know who you are, you're probably going to be waiting a while. Prices just aren't likely to drop to what you were hoping for, and with interest rates going up, you're going to be able to afford less and less home as more time goes by. And even if you're paying cash and don't have to worry about interest rates, you still need to be given some serious thought as to the differences in the Florida housing market compared to wherever you're living now. Because for a long while, prices were heading up at a pretty hefty rate nearly everywhere. But as things start to normalize, they are not leveling out at the same rate all over. The Sunbelt states like Florida are probably going to keep going up, at least for a little while longer than most other states. So if you wait too long to make the leap, you're going to cost yourself money. Wait too long and your selling power isn't going to match up with what you got to have in order to buy what you want, at least if you're hoping to move here. And on the flip side, if you're planning on selling, you probably ought to start talking to some real estate agents, or maybe just one. But regardless, you don't want to try and wait until the market hits peak before you list your home, because you know what? We never know when the market's peaked until it starts to drop. And nobody really wants to sell when the market's dropping. You want to sell now when demand is high and inventory is still low, and not when they're both about even. Now is when you're going to get your best price, not after everything's settled and there are a bunch of other homes just like yours available for buyers to choose from. Because right now you're still in the catbird seat as far as getting your best price. So take advantage of that while you still can. Now, there is one other reason that people seem to think that the housing market is heading for a huge fall, and that's interest rates. And yeah, interest rates are affecting the housing market. But interest rates and what's going on in that department are kind of a topic unto themselves, and they really deserve their own discussion. So I'm going to save that one for next week. So that said, I'll see you next week, and as always, if you haven't done it already, just take a sec to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything.